Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a question that pushes us right to the edge of human experience. What does it really take to survive?
All right, let's just jump right in with a classic scenario, shall we? Your ship's going down. You've got just enough time to grab 3 things before you're swimming for a deserted island. What are you going to take? Think about it for a sec.
So, if you're like most of us, your mind probably went straight to things, right? A knife, a flare gun, maybe some matches. We're just, wired to think that survival is all about the gear. But what we're going to explore today is how the real story, well, it's way deeper and a lot more complex than whatever you can stuff in a backpack.
Okay, so first up, the physical ordeal. Let's peel back that, heroic myth and get real about what raw physical survival actually looks like and feels like.
And, you can't talk about physical survival without talking about the unbelievable journey of the James Caird. I mean, after their ship gets crushed by ice, Ernest Shackleton and 5 of his guys get into this tiny 22-foot lifeboat, and they set out to cross 800 miles of the most insane ocean on Earth to get help. This quote from Shackleton, it doesn't even begin to cover the hell they went through. And look, this wasn't some one-and-done act of heroism. This was a slow, grinding, repetitive fight against certain death. Their boat, their only shelter, starts sinking under 15 inches of solid ice. Yeah, they had axes and knives, but survival wasn't just having the tools. It was using them for hours on end, freezing, exhausted, knowing that one slip, just one little puncture in that canvas skin, and it's game over for everyone. That's physical endurance.
So that's the body. But here's the thing. As brutal as that physical fight is, the battle is nowhere near over once you're safe. For so many survivors, that's when the real ordeal begins, the one that plays out inside your own head.
And to really get a handle on this, we need to talk about guilt. The philosopher Nancy Sherman draws this really important line between 2 different kinds. You've got objective guilt, that's the straightforward one. You did something wrong, you're responsible. But then there's subjective guilt, and this is the tricky one. It's that gut-wrenching feeling of being responsible even when, factually, you did absolutely nothing wrong. This is the one that haunts survivors.
You see this perfectly captured in Haruki Murakami's incredible story, The Seventh Man. The narrator makes it through this giant wave that, tragically, kills his best friend. And for the next 40 years, he is just tormented by this idea that he could have saved him, even though he was just a kid himself, totally terrified. This quote right here, it's the voice of that endless, painful loop of what if. That's subjective guilt in a nutshell.
And this is not just something from a story. Captain John Pryor lived this. He was in a friendly fire incident where one of his soldiers was killed. Now, officially, he was cleared of all wrongdoing. Objectively, not his fault. But listen to what he says. That official piece of paper does absolutely nothing to get rid of the deep, subjective guilt he lives with every single day. The feeling is totally separate from the facts.
All right, so survival tests your body, it messes with your mind, but it can also take your moral compass and just snap it in two. It can push you into territory you never, ever thought you'd have to navigate. Let's take a look at Pi, from the book Life of Pi. Here's a guy who is a devout vegetarian. His faith is central to his life. And suddenly, he's stranded on a lifeboat with a tiger. As the food runs out, he's staring down a choice that attacks the very core of who he is. And this quote, man, it just perfectly sums up the moral brick wall he's slammed into.
And you can actually watch his transformation happen step by step. It's pretty unsettling. First, he's just weeping. He can't even bring himself to kill a fish. Then when he finally does it, he's disgusted. But then he feels a flicker of pride. And before you know it, he's gleefully, brutally bludgeoning a big fish to death. The speed at which his morals just erode, it's honestly terrifying.
Pi's journey really hammers home a dark truth about what it takes to survive. As he puts it himself, it's simple and brutal. You can get used to absolutely anything, even killing. It's just a chilling example of how fast our most cherished principles can just poof, vanish when our life is on the line.
Okay, so Pi's choices were forced on him by sheer desperation. But what about the choices we make on purpose? This brings up a really interesting debate happening right now. If adventurers take huge risks and need to be rescued, should they foot the bill? I mean, on one hand, it kind of makes sense, right? Hold people accountable. But there's a powerful counter-argument. If you know you're going to get hit with a massive bill, you might wait too long to call for help. And that delay could be the difference between life and death.
So all these struggles, the physical, the mental, the moral, they all point to one big overarching truth. Survival is almost never a one-person show. It's social. It's about who's there for you. And just as critically, it's about how much society thinks your life is worth.
So let me ask you this. In a big disaster, who's more helpful? Is it the official emergency services, or is it your friends and family? Well, Shankar Vedantam from NPR looked into this, and the answer might surprise you. It turns out that having strong social connections, your neighbors, your friends, is one of the best predictors of who makes it through. They're the real first responders.
Now let's put that next to what happens on Mount Everest, which reveals a much, much darker side of our social values. Grayson Schaffer, in his piece, The Value of a Sherpa Life, just lays it all out. A Western climber might shell out $65,000 or more for their trip. Part of that is an $11,000 climbing permit. Now get this. The life of the Sherpa guide, the person taking on the most danger, is required by law to be insured for $11,000, the exact same as the permit. But our society also makes calls about whose life is worth saving and what we're willing to spend. Take a look at this number, $663,000. That's what it costs to rescue just one family on a sailboat, 900 miles off the coast of Mexico. An operation that involved the Navy, the Coast Guard, and the Air National Guard.
And that right there, that gets to the absolute core of the problem. Schaffer's point isn't really about the money itself. It's about, in his words, acknowledging the deep sense of responsibility we owe to the people who are literally carrying the entire expedition on their backs. These are the men who make it all possible, and they're the ones who pay the highest price. Survival, it turns out, isn't just about you. It's about the value your society puts on your life.
Okay, so we've looked at the physical fight, the mental anguish, the moral compromises, and the social web that we all live in. Let's circle all the way back to where we started. What does it actually take to survive?
Well, it's pretty clear it's not about the three things you grab from that sinking ship, right? As we've seen, real survival is this incredibly complex thing. It's not one skill. It's this messy, difficult combination of raw physical endurance, the mental toughness to fight off your own demons, the moral flexibility to do things you thought were impossible, and your absolute dependence on the people around you, for good and for bad.
And all of that brings us to one last, really tough question to chew on. When someone is pushed to the absolute breaking point, when they're staring death in the face, can we really judge them by the same rules we use in our everyday safe lives? Should they be held accountable for what they do to stay alive? I'll leave you with that, because there is no easy answer.